Welcome to Conflict Managed. I'm your host, Mary Brown. Conflict Managed is a weekly podcast about toxic work environments and how to fix them. We're glad you're here. Good morning, Chris, and welcome to Conflict Managed.
Good morning.
How are you today?
Doing great. Thanks for having me.
Excellent. Chris and I are in West Tennessee, so we are braving the heat right now, and I'm just trying to remember what a cold winter we had. So, it doesn't really do much good when it's this hot.
Yes, it's oppressive. That's for sure.
That's for
But
sure.
that's
So,
the way it
Chris,
goes.
that's right. Will you tell us about the first job you ever had as a young person?
The first job that I ever had was working for my family's construction business. And when I say construction, I mean my stepdad did, odds and ends, home repair and things like that. And he would, from time to time, he would have a helper. So it wasn't like it was this big construction business. But the very first job that I had and the very first thing that we did was a commercial roof replacement. I was 14 years old. And you talk about hot West Tennessee summers. It was incredibly hot and it was on a roof. And I was 14 and I think I was making, $3.35 an hour because this is like 1987, so it was, very, very hot, very hard work. But that was my first job. I did that all throughout summer, high school and college. But we also had, we had one of the first organic farms and certified organic farms in Tennessee. And so, we grew cotton, vegetables, watermelons, tomatoes, everything that you can think of. And since it was organic, we had to do all manual chopping of the weeds and all this stuff. And so everything that I did throughout high school as for work was just always incredibly hot. So that's a good topic to start on. But, working on the family farm, working in the construction business, and then we evolved into, we actually built a few houses. But I did that all through high school and college. And so that was my first, and I don't think it wasn't until college that I got other jobs, but that was my first job.
Wow. I mean, baptism by fire, first out in the sun, but hard
Yeah.
work, sometimes dangerous work. And then working for family, which is so different, as you know, than working for someone who isn't family. What was the family dynamic like?
Yeah, that was interesting because actually, very long story, but I'll just cut it short. I actually was raised by my grandparents, and my parents got divorced when I was young. They've passed away now, but they got divorced when I was young, and I went to live with my grandparents in Tiptonville, and so I spent, it was up until probably 86 that my mother actually got remarried and moved back to the farm because my grandfather was sick. Ended up passing away in 1987, and so she had moved back to help take over things with the farm. And so it was definitely an interesting time. It was probably the toughest time of my life, that summer before my ninth grade year. My grandfather, I started that job working. She had just come back the previous year. Had never lived with her except when I was a little kid. And so trying to navigate all that as a young person whose father, my grandfather was serving as my father, who, passed away in September of that year. And so that was a very, very difficult and challenging time in my life. And so family and work were all mixed together, and all the emotions and all the problems. And, I was very, I guess, rebellious. It's like my grandfather died. And so any father figure or anybody else, like my stepdad, and I'd just gotten to know him, and now I'm working for him. And so I was pretty much a knucklehead, just anybody, my coaches or whatever, I really pushed back a lot. And so I had a lot of growing up to do, and it took me many years, but that was a very, yeah, family and work all mixed together was a very challenging
Mm.
time.
Wow. And then surrounded with tragedy. Yeah. So, what did you go to college to major in?
Well, and I was talking to somebody about this the other day. I went and I was undecided. I think originally I wanted to be an architect, and I'll say I had a teacher I think he's passed away now. I won't mention his name, but you know, as I said, I was not the best person, I think, through high school, and wasn't the best student. Just had a lot of problems with, you know, dealing with grief and everything. And so, but I loved buildings, and I did love construction, and I thought I wanted to be an architect. Well, I had a teacher, a math teacher, that told me, basically I wasn't smart enough to be an architect, and he was probably right because I was not applying myself in school. I didn't do homework. I would just do it right before class. And he knew that architects, it's a very skilled trade or position. And so I didn't even apply for architecture school at that time. I spent a semester at Memphis State, and then I went on to UT. And I was undecided, but I bounced around in business, kind of going back and forth in business uh, degrees. But after 4 years, I didn't graduate, and I ended up moving to Florida and continuing as a carpenter and later becoming a cabinet maker. But back to your question, so I was undecided the whole time. I changed majors multiple times, and so I was telling somebody the other day is, I just wish I had had somebody that would have just kind of, lack of a better term, kicked me in the tail and just told me, you can't go to college and be undeclared. It's just a waste of time, a waste of money. But that's what I did. And so, yeah.
Hmm. I want to go back to this interesting, oh, sad, with this teacher said, you're not smart enough to do this. And as reflecting, you said, well, at the time, I wasn't applying myself. And I think that should all give us pause to not make pronouncements on people's lives, right? Because it could be
Yes.
at this particular slice of time, you're a young person going through more than most, right? A very, very different. It's hard when everything is stable. It's hard to be a teenager because we're not stable, right? Our emotions and the world is changing. Um, but when we see that somebody has a deficiency, there are ways to call that out so the person can be better. And there's a way to stifle that person by labeling them. And those are really tough messages sometimes to not mull over, resonate, or take on as a truth when it might have just been at that very small time in life.
Yeah, that's true. And I was incredibly shy and had a kind of a little bit of a speech impediment, just mild, but something I was always conscious of. And and so it was a challenging time, but I tell you, through those things, and they're the things that you don't forget. That's like you said, that was something that he might have even just been joking. He was a coach of mine too, and but this has been 30 something years or 35 years ago that he said that, and I remember it like it was yesterday, and it's actually motivated me throughout life.
Mhm.
And so, not to kind of fast forward, but I went and I worked, as a carpenter and a cabinet maker down in Florida, and then I really wanted to be an architect. And so, through building furniture and cabinetry and all that, I built up a portfolio, and I had pictures and drawings of the things that I did. And later on, I moved back to Knoxville, and I got into the architecture and design program on my portfolio and not on my grades. So I came in through the interior design program, which is architecture and design. First year is all in the same college. So the idea is I was able to get in through that side, and then I was going to pursue the full architecture degree after that. So anyway, I just have always remembered that I got into one of the toughest degree programs at UT Knoxville, and I had a 4.0 while having a full time job as a cabinet maker. So I always look back and say, well, I might not have been smart enough, but I did get into one of the best programs at UT. So there you go.
So definitely smart enough, which is another interesting point of there are lots of different ways in which intelligence shows itself. And when we do apply ourselves. So a good question for all of us as we are around people that maybe we're mentoring is what's going on with them that is a barrier for their achievement, right? And so when you think about your work history, has there been anyone, a teacher or somebody you've worked for that has been a mentor?
I've definitely had some mentors, and it was not until much later that I really recognized what a mentor was.
Mm,
And just thinking back, one of the shops that I worked in the Keys, and I lived down in Key West and worked as a cabinet maker down there, did other things, worked on sailboats, charter boats, and all this stuff. But um, I worked in a cabinet shop, and I just think back of I spent years there, and I learned so much from all the guys that were there. There was no book to learn from. There was no processes written, but all of the people in that shop, it was a big production shop. And so I just learned so much from each one. I just asked a lot of questions. There was a lot of machinery to learn. It took a long time to learn all of those machines and all the skills. And as I think back, those guys just poured into me, and it wasn't like an official mentorship. And my
mhm,
boss, the guy that ran the shop, I just remember I thought of him as being really stern, at the time. But now that I look back on it, he was so patient with me, and even in a tough environment like that, and just allowed me to learn, allowed me to make mistakes.
mm,
I messed up things, expensive things, and then, they didn't just beat you up over it. They'd, correct you and say, hey, this is how you fixed it. So, you know, so that was probably one of the first. And I say my stepdad, just taught me everything I knew about carpentry. So I have this lifelong skill that that can carry with me till today. I say if all this went away tomorrow, I can go swing a hammer or build cabinets or something. And so, but I'd say probably one of them is in my professional career. One of the most important mentors I had was Alan Hester, who was the late Alan Hester. He's the director of the Chamber of Commerce here in Dyersburg, and so he was definitely a big mentor for me. Really introduced me to a lot of people. I did work for him at the chamber in my business, and yeah, but he was just a great guy, and so sorely missed. But yeah, he was probably one of the biggest impacts in my life professionally.
So what was it about him specifically that resonated with you?
I don't know. It's just, he just kind of took me under his wing, and,
Mm,
I could have just been a vendor doing, at Tencom, one of the businesses that I own, Tencom. We still do website development, IT services. And, he could have just hired me to build a website for the chamber, but he went beyond that, and he would take me to conferences. He'd invite me to conferences. He introduced me to other people. And now I have tons of relationships with people in chambers of commerce all over West Tennessee and beyond because of the introductions that he made.
mm,
And he even one time sent me to Denver for a conference that he couldn't attend. So he gave me his ticket. I had to kind of pay my own way to get there, but he did things, that I don't think he didn't have to do. I didn't deserve them, but for some reason he just kind of took me under his wing and helped me develop professionally. And it's weird, you talk about mentors, you don't go and say, hey, will you be my mentor? Somebody just becomes a mentor to you. And so I had a pastor one time that talked about this concept of I think he called it vertical relationships. And so if somebody's a mentor to you, then you be sure to be a mentor for somebody else. And so if somebody's pulling you up, you pull somebody up with you at the same time. And so that's something that's really stuck with me. I try to be a mentor for people that work for me or people that I encounter with my nonprofit work with the Mill Workspace. So, yeah.
That's such a wonderful picture of being seen. He saw you and then acted in this particular way, and then to be seen and included and trusted, and um, as you said, this not deserving but gotten anyway, right? And that's a lot of times we think, why is this person pouring into me? But it gives us a kind of confidence, and it gives us these opportunities that I think it's interesting because in a way you talked about two different kinds of mentorship relationships. One that probably maybe at the time you noticed what was going on, but like in the cabinet shop, hindsight gives that to you, right? And so many people, it doesn't matter if they are the leader, their peer, or maybe even under you, most people want to share their knowledge. Most people want their coworkers to do well. And people who have a body of knowledge or an expertise, one joy they get is not only doing it, but passing it on and then seeing the other person flourish. Um, and so sometimes we just recognize the gifts that we are given retroly, and sometimes we're able to kind of see it at the moment, like, wow, this person really is um, really paying attention to me and helping me out in this very significant way.
And I think sometimes people, there, like you said, there's people that want to share their knowledge, but you're busy, you're going through life, you're going through your work. And I think I was thinking about this the other day with people that have worked for me. It's almost the person, the mentee pulls the mentor in.
Mm,
It's not really the other way around. And what I mean by that is somebody that comes into the workplace or into your life and they're actively asking you questions and for advice, then you tend to open up and want to pour more and more into them because people don't want to be, and especially with an employee, you don't want to be too bossy and
mhm,
overpowering in their lives. But when they open that door, even if it's to something personal, then you can really pour in. And an example of that is young guys that work with me, have we talk about just in the course of work, we talk about our homes and our lives, and I encourage people to buy their own home, and the earlier the better. But that's one where I had guys talking to me about that, and then I just pour everything I can into them to give them advice on what it takes to own a home. You have to have a job for a couple of years, you have to have a down payment, and so like I said, it's just somebody. It's like the mentee unlocks the mentor. So that's I think good advice for young people, young professionals is to actively go out, invite someone older, more experienced to lunch, talk to them, and you'd be surprised at how much they're willing to pour into your life.
mm. That's such good advice. Showing up and showing up, right? Showing up and being ready. And anybody can do that. You can do that when you are 14 on a roof. You can do it when you're working at McDonald's. You can do it in your first quote unquote professional job or anywhere along the line. You can show up. And I think a lot of people who are advanced in their career, the work is so much, but it's almost like you see these little lights go off and it grabs your attention, right? And so I see this person who is showing up and they are curious and they are doing these things and they are demonstrating their competence in a particular kind of way that then grabs my attention, right? And so it is this almost kismet of how do I get a mentor, right? How do I get someone to notice me? Be it so that you can't be noticed, right? Show up and do good work and be competent and ask those questions. And when you do that, most people, a lot of times you're going to make those connections and those relationships.
Yeah, and I think the flip side of that, if you don't do the basic things, I always say the most important thing you can do in a day is to be on time.
Mm.
So there's also things to wait to lock up a mentor. I'm saying in the workplace, if a
Mhm.
mentor's in the workplace, if you're doing the little things that annoy management and the people that you work with, then they tend to close up and they're
Mm.
not going to pour into you. But if you're doing the basic things, showing up on time, asking questions, doing your work, then people will pour into you.
Mm.
So
I like that you said that, in the little things, because I think that's where our relationships anywhere are won or lost. It's in the little things. And so, I know why I'm showing up late. I always have a good reason. And then I get to work and then I do everything I'm supposed to do. And now I'm like, why is this person annoyed at me? Why is this person? Well, when you start off on the wrong foot and you keep on stepping on that toe, right?
yeah,
Or, it's like a thorn in the side. And those are things within our control, right? So if I know I'm
absolutely.
chronically late and I'm supposed to be there at 8, then I'm just going to have to set my alarm differently. I'm going to have to tell myself, no, I have to be there at 7:30, so I get there at 7:45. I mean, there are workarounds. And we all have, none of us are perfect, right? And so all of us have issues in which we struggle. And so the question is, okay, knowing it, acknowledging that it is a problem instead of brushing it off, and then saying, what is my workaround? Do I need help finding that workaround to brainstorm with somebody so that I in those little things, which I think no one's paying attention. People are paying attention.
Yeah, and it's kind of like the boy who cried wolf.
Mhm.
If you're consistently late, first off, it's going to create problems in the workplace, all kinds of problems. It just snowballs from there. The beginning of the day, but the big problem that happens is when you actually legitimately need to miss work for a family situation or some other situation. And I've caught myself at this, and it's very hard to be empathetic to someone's situation when they're chronically late for work and not doing the little things to show that they appreciate the job. And then when they have something serious, and it's something that I have to really check myself on. When it's something serious, you don't know if it's actually serious because you've heard 100 other excuses for why they're late. And then the conflict that happens there is then that person's feelings get hurt because you didn't show the empathy that they needed at that time. And this has recently happened to me with a guy that started work with us, and he was late the first 4 days of work that he started. And on the fifth day, he called in and said his dog was sick. And I definitely didn't show the empathy that I needed to, because later on his dog passed away that day. And he didn't, I'm sure, I know for a fact that he didn't feel like I really felt for his situation, but I was just so frustrated. It was day 5. He'd been late every day. And then the 5th day he calls with this excuse. And then, he shows back up the next week on time, one time, and then no show, no call for 2 days after that. And when I finally wouldn't take my calls, wouldn't take text, I couldn't get him. I didn't know what had happened to him. I finally had to terminate him through an email, which is the most terrible thing I think to do. And when he finally emailed me back, like right after that, and said he brought up the fact that I didn't show sympathy toward him during when his dog passed away.
Mhm.
And so that's it's just an example. Had he been on time the first 4 days of work, my heart would have been a whole lot softer to the situation that he was having. And
Mm.
so it's a tough situation. Great guy. Hated to lose him, but it was just one of those things we just couldn't get through.
Yeah. It's unfortunate, but I think it's such a real situation how we can just miscommunicate. I might think of myself as being on time, but on time for me is 5 to 10 to 20 minutes late. But I had this view because in my family, I am the person who's on time and everybody else is an hour late. And then it could be the vice versa, 8 o'clock being 7:30, and so through miscommunication or misunderstanding of standards, this situation can easily arise, right? And I really love this idea of crying wolf, right? So we're just people, and when we hear or when we see misbehavior, um, and we hear excuse after excuse after excuse, or sometimes no excuse, like they don't think they even need to say anything about it. Then when
Yeah.
something does come up, we're already jaded in a way. And so, you know, after, on the first day when he was late, you know, but a lot of times we don't think about that. We think, oh, they're just getting warmed up, right? And then the second day, oh, well, and we go along with people because we trust
Yeah.
them, right? So, this sort of, all these errors kind of compound. Um, yeah, those are the kinds of things that just pop up.
Yeah. You have empathy. It's kind of interesting. The first day of work, I think I would try to be here an hour early and sit in the parking lot because I'd be so paranoid about being late. But when there's a different excuse 4 days in a row, and then you have a
Yeah.
fifth excuse, which is you know, which was actually a legitimate thing, I do believe.
Mhm.
But at the time, it was the 5th day of the
Right.
first week, and I was just tired of hearing the excuses. And there was going to be a guy here all by himself. There was another guy already off work that day, and so it set me up to not be the best person that I could have been for this guy. I mean, he was definitely having a bad day, and
Mhm.
I believe that now. I didn't know the seriousness of the situation at the time, but it just, I didn't handle it the best way I could have, but he could have handled it better as well. So sometimes, you have conflict and you just can't get around it. It's just like a two trains coming together,
Mhm.
and there's no way around it. But I think it's important to do everything you can to avoid those situations and learn from them when they happen. I've reflected on that and wondered, what could I have done better? Um, but I don't know that it would have helped. So.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. Conflict is going to happen. We want to do conflict is not the problem, it's when we don't manage it. And since it is going to happen, has happened, is, and will in the future, really thinking about, okay, what, if anything, could I have done differently? Would this have changed the circumstance? And how do I move forward? Right. So, in all of our experiences, it's an opportunity to think and workshop and what can I do next, right? How can we make it so that unnecessary conflict doesn't happen? Right. So we're going to have conflict, but some of it is of our own doing. So if again, going back to timeliness, uh, I encourage, all workers should have a conversation with their boss. What is timeliness to you? Because some people do not care, and some people are care very much. And so, as a person who's working for somebody else, you need to understand what their expectation is, right? And so, if you know about yourself that you're chronically late, how are these personalities going to work well together? Or this maybe is not going to be a place for you, or but having those expectations, and so articulating the everyday structure of work so that we can get our work done, right? We need this really good structure where everybody knows. And I think a good example with the lateness setting the wrong tone for the day is because what about all the other workers? Everyone wants to know
Mhm.
about justice. Who's being treated? Are we all being treated the same way? So I had to get up a half hour early to make sure that my kids were, fed and dressed and off to school. And I got here in time. And it was really hard, especially today, but this person didn't have to be on time. Why? Like, what's going on here? And it is in this every day that we're trying to understand, am I valued here? So other workers could be looking at that and say, why do the rules not apply to that person? What are these rules?
Yeah, it can definitely create a toxic work environment when if you tolerate bad behavior
Mhm.
from one person. And so I believe in praising in public and counseling in private. And so, I think maybe when somebody's late or whatever, and I finally say something about it, I'm saying it in private so the other people don't necessarily see that conversation. Cause I think with men, especially, I don't know about women, but with men, you just hate to be called out in front of people. And maybe that's true for everyone, but I know for men for sure. And so, so we try to have those conversations in private. And I think that, and the other people in the workplace, they can maybe tell because, I've called somebody into a meeting. And so maybe they know, but I don't necessarily always have a meeting, and I don't have a big problem with this. It's not like I have a lot of trouble with this, but, um, so yeah, you can definitely create a toxic environment by not rooting out bad behavior. And in our world, like in the IT world, it's a service business and it's a very tough thing. So if somebody's not doing well, we could just let that person go, but then it's very hard to find other help, especially in a rural area in the IT field. It's very hard to find people and it's very hard to train them up. It takes months and years to get people trained. So I'm always playing this balancing game of, all right, do I tolerate this mildly bad behavior and the other people, it creates a toxic environment and the other people see me not, letting this person go. But at the same time, I'm trying to keep help here so that they're not overburdened with more work. So it's this balancing act. And so for years, I actually was on this side of the pendulum where I tolerated bad behavior to keep people here so that it didn't put more of a burden on the rest of the team. And now I actually am, I'm much quicker to discipline and termination if needed. Um, you know, because I think it's just a better to people to know not going to tolerate bad employees. Um, and I think it's a better way to be.
Yeah, I mean, so many business owners have that, that quandary. I don't want this bad behavior, but if I let this person go, then who's going to get this work done? And these other people are going to have to step up, but it's going to be a burden to these others. But if I let this bad behavior go, then I am endorsing in a way that it's okay to treat others this way, or it's okay to have this kind of negligent work ethic. So having swung this other way, um, and I'm sure business owners are interested. So has it worked better for you?
It's better in a way, but so we're still a small company, even though we've been in business for 24 years. It's better in a way, but it creates this big problem for me when I have to let somebody go, which I really hate to do. But if I have to let someone go, then I don't have an HR manager. I am the HR. So it's 100% on me to go recruit new people, go through the interview process. The most recent round we went through, I had 100 applications, 30 interviews virtually. Then I had multiple interviews in person. Uh, but by the time someone gets hired, there's two or three. They've gone through about three interviews with the team, with me, and so it creates this other problem. And so that's another thing is in the past, I'd kind of put off discipline and put off letting someone go because I knew I was getting ready to 2 weeks of my life were getting ready to be extremely busy and I already have a lot going on. But now it's just I just take it like, hey, this is just something I didn't choose this, this person, I'm gonna have to deal with it. And it's just part of it. Now, having said that, is we've been blessed and we're growing tremendously over the last few years. And so at some point, I'd like to get an HR manager or somebody that at least does that role to take that part off of me. But I just have definitely swung the other way, and I want to make sure. Now, it might sound like I'm hiring people and just letting people go. I do everything I can to make sure people are successful.
Right.
Here we have I say don't take it as criticism. It's feedback. This job, it's kind of like building the plane as you fly. We can't train for everything, so we have to train on the fly. And so the guys that can take feedback and not see it as criticism, then they're the ones that are going to be more successful. So
And that is just the way in being a professional in any business, that if you want to succeed and have a good professional career, you need to be able to take feedback. And a lot of times, hopefully your manager is giving you the positive feedback, because most of the stuff that we do is going to be positive, but we are going to have bad days. We're going to make mistakes. There's going to be, whatever. And so that's a part of accepting reality. Reality is we're going to hear things we don't want to hear, and we're going to get called out. And in retrospect, we can see those as the real gifts that they are.
and I make sure to add in gratitude wherever I can.
Yeah.
So and I really, and it's interesting. It's something that takes effort. It doesn't come naturally to just constantly praise people because you can just be frustrated throughout the day with things that have gone wrong. And so
Mhm.
sometimes it's after work that I've reflected on something and I'll shoot a text over to one of the guys and say, hey, great job today. Thanks for getting that done. It's really helped that now we won't have to do that tomorrow. And I just appreciate your work. And so I've definitely, as I've gotten older, I've gotten much better at showing appreciation to people, um, and try to do that publicly in front. So, like I said, praise in public, try to do it in front of other people. A lot of times I catch myself after work doing it, but I do make an effort to give more positive feedback. And
Yeah.
we operate through Teams, we Microsoft Teams,
Mhm.
and so, we share messages back and forth throughout the day too. And so I'll try to say, great job. Thanks for getting that done. Especially when we're very process oriented. And so when somebody publishes a new process and puts it out on Teams, we applaud that big time, because it's a big improvement to the company. And so,
You make a really good point that, we say, because I think, what should managers be doing? They should be noticing what their workers are doing, and 90 some odd percent is good. It's good work, right? And so there's a lot to praise, but it is the case that we don't really a lot of times just notice the everyday that makes things run smoothly, that people are showing up, that they're doing what they're supposed to be doing. We don't notice it because that's the normal. What we tend to notice is when things have fallen apart, right? And so that
For sure.
naturally grabs our attention, and things that we need to fix and things that we need to correct. And so those are the things that we're going to be talking about. But it's almost like, I think, in news stories, if it bleeds, it leads, right? So what is on the news is largely true, but it's all the mayhem because that's what caught our attention. Yeah, there was a murder, but we didn't talk about the tens of thousands of people. We're talking about the one person who robbed a store, and we're not talking about all the people on that given day who were volunteering their time, their money, who were helping their neighbor, who were, right. That's the real story of what happened on that day in that town. But we're only hearing this negative thing because it's what should not have happened. And so it's so very easy to have that draw our attention, but then we get a skewed view of maybe even ourselves and the environment. How am I doing here? Because, if I'm only hearing the bad. So I like that you're articulating it takes effort. And for most of us, because when somebody shows up for work, we're like, yeah, that's what they're supposed to do. But we also know that not everybody does it. And that actually makes our day run smoothly when we have somebody who's reliable. That reliability is golden. But it's not something that's always on our mind to articulate.
And they say, like if you're the higher up, I think is there's a lot of truth in it, but the higher up you go in a business, especially when you become the owner, is you tend to just be dealing with problems.
Mm.
So if you've trained everybody on all these other tasks, then now you have the problems to deal with. So the big things that can't be resolved, the big problems, all the level 3 things are the things that you're dealing with throughout the day, and it's very easy to get just the cumulative effects of all this stress with problems, and it's very easy. It's very quick to get hot and stressed with all the problems, and then so as far as gratitude and appreciation, it's hard to do that with that kind of stress on you. And
Yeah.
so you got to find a way to push through that, cool down, and still be appreciative of the people around you and not get frustrated with them. That's probably one of the things that I've evolved on the most is I get interrupted a lot during the day, and I try my best not to show frustration with, okay, I start to work on something and then somebody walks into my office and I could get real frustrated and throw my hands down, but I just pause and I listen to them, and I might be frustrated, but then I try to get back to what I'm doing. Then the phone rings or somebody else comes up. So it definitely takes discipline to push through the frustrations of business ownership, business management to to
Yeah.
and to show
Intentionality.
appreciation. Yeah,
Yeah.
because I always try to think, why would I want to work here if I'm the type of person that's just always frustrated and mad about everything? So I've got
Mhm.
to. It definitely takes a lot of discipline. That takes work for me, is to push through all those frustrations to still be a boss that people want to work for.
Mhm. That's such a good point. How did you move from or change careers from cabinetry to what you're doing now? And tell us what you're doing now.
Yeah, so I founded Tencom Services back in 2001. So I've been in business for 24 years. Tencom Services is a managed IT services and marketing agency, primarily on the IT services side. But I started out building websites, um, and then doing IT work. So now we're just a fully outsourced IT department for organizations, whether it be business, healthcare, governments. We basically can do everything an internal IT department can do and better, I think, because we have a whole staff. So, but that transition, and then I also started the nonprofit, the Mill Workspace, in 2 years ago. But the transition from cabinetry to computer networks and everything, my sister was needing. She worked in corporate IT, back here in West Tennessee, and she needed to take a leave of absence for some healthcare issues. And she knew that even though I'd never worked in IT, I worked on computers, and I was, always very interested in them. And so I was at Knoxville in the architecture and design program, working as full time as a cabinet maker. And, all those years of basically from 14 until my late 20s, I had hurt my back, was having breathing problems. And I think back now, I think guys that worked in the office or worked in the shop looked like they were probably in their 70s, and they're probably younger than I am now. They had breathing problems,
Mm.
back problems, just problems with their knees and feet because you're on your feet all day. And when you work in cabinet shops, it's not like it's an air conditioned environment. It's either freezing cold or super hot.
Mm.
And, I hope it's better now for people that work in those careers. But at the time, I didn't feel like anybody cared about my health at all. And it was kind of a unmanly thing to complain about your environment,
Mm.
like your health environment. Things have definitely changed in the last 30 years. But so looking around at all these people, and I'm thinking, man, I'm in my late 20s. My back's already hurt. I'm having trouble breathing. I'm going to be like this guy. And then my sister calls and says, hey, can you fill in for me for a couple of months? I really need somebody to help. And there's nobody. I mean, this is rural West Tennessee. It's not like the IT field was really developed 30 years ago. And so it just happened to be the end of the semester. I went to my boss and I put in a leave of absence with my boss, and I came and I worked. Long story short, I worked that summer in corporate IT, and I realized, man, and I really didn't like it a whole lot, to tell you the truth, but I just realized this is a much more viable path forward than what I'm doing now.
Mm.
I don't think, for my health alone.
Mm.
So it was kind of a weird transition. I didn't think, really want to be in the computer business. I just got that call, so it kind of just changed the trajectory. And then I met my future wife at the plant that I was working at, and so then that changed everything. And so my dream of becoming an architect quickly faded. It wasn't as important anymore. So I finally moved back home to West Tennessee after being gone for 10 years or more. So that was kind of the transition. And then I quickly, after getting into the IT field, I quickly realized that I wanted to work for myself.
Mm.
And so then I started, I mean, probably the first year that I was there, I started doing side work, and I started Tencom as a side business. And so it was probably about a 4 to 5 year overlap in the corporate IT and then Tencom as a side business. And it finally just got to be too much to do both. And I finally made the leap.
Mm. When you were talking, it made me think about from architecture to IT, but building systems. I mean, it is building, right? It is these structures that go together, don't go together, right? And so it's virtual, right? But it is a kind of building.
It's really interesting how all these things tie together. So, architecture and design school, like I said, interior design and architecture students did the same exact program the first year.
Mm.
And at the time, this was 30 years ago, but at the time, they didn't, you worked on computers later on in the program, but the first year you didn't touch a computer. It was all design theory, abstract. It wasn't like you were drawing floor plans. It was very abstract. You took art classes and drawing, and it was very artistic the first year. It was a lot of art and design. And then also my woodworking skills. I did furniture design that year too. And so it was that when I said I didn't go back to Knoxville, but I had not finished college. I went the first 4 years. I went several years without going to school. Then I went back to UT. Well, when I came back and I decided I wasn't going to go back to Knoxville, I actually worked. UT Martin had a program. I don't know if they still have it, but it's called the Bachelor of University Studies.
Oh,
And
right.
they called
Mhm.
it, they used to promote it called Get on the Bus. I don't know if you remember that, but Get on the Bus. It was for these people that just couldn't find a degree program that fit.
Mhm.
And so I actually was able to take all my previous business classes and all my design classes, and I made a degree called commercial design.
Mhm.
And who was it? Tommy Cates was my advisor, and the board approved it, and I graduated with a BUS in commercial design. Uh, and coincidentally, I designed my own degree called commercial design. But that all really helped me when we went into building websites. And so you talk about building systems, but the website's the creative side of it.
Yeah.
I took all of that knowledge of designing and drawing furniture and working on plans and brought it into the website business. And then it definitely does translate, like you said, into systems development.
Yeah, nothing is lost. No experience is lost.
Yeah.
Every experience, because the people that we work with, how we show up, how we don't show up, the particular skills we learn, and we learn one set of skills and that gets morphed into the next one. And so I think when we sell people short by saying, what was your past experience? And if we lack any kind of imagination and we think we just look at their job description, um, people they're never their job description, right? I mean, like we're like jobs are like these octopuses, right? Because it's this particular thing, but how did I get there? And everything I learned before, and then how I'm moving on to the next. I mean, my background's in philosophy, and how does philosophy translate to conflict management? And I think seamlessly, right? Given the kind of philosophy that I did and my own background in teaching and training, what I do now, I see this direct line. But of course, sometimes we need to be the ones to articulate that for people. But I say nothing is ever lost because I don't think it is. Our relationships, our business relationships, and all that we learn.
I believe that for sure. There's one thing that's interesting. So IT services like we do, we're not computer programmers. So there's not a real, like a university level degree program for what we do. Computer science teaches people to be computer programmers. But in the computer networking business, there's more like at TCAT and the community colleges that do that now. But what's interesting is there's so much, it's kind of a blue collar, white collar job because it might be an office job, but then there are things that you need to learn how to use tools to do. So not just working on computers, but putting in networks, like putting in racks.
Mhm.
You have to, have woodworking skills to cut backer boards, to put the racks on, and just all these. So that's one of the things it was kind of surprising to me. I took for granted that people knew how to use tools in IT, but as it turns out, most people don't. It's a very rare skill in IT, and we have to train people on how to use just tools like a hammer, a wrench. You think about it, a lot of some young guys that they've just been working on computers and they've never touched a tool. Like they didn't have the experience that I had with a
Mhm.
stepfather that taught me everything I knew. I learned how to work with every tool. And so that's a very interesting tie-in with my carpentry background
Yeah.
is the need to be able to work with tools in this job.
Yeah.
So yeah, you're right. Nothing's lost. I've carried that with me into this career as well. So
So when we think about conflict at work, and the kind of work that you do now, so like it is interesting, this mixture of white collar, blue collar. I also do think though that conflict is conflict no matter what kind of job, whether it's you're the CEO in some suite of a giant organization or you are part-time seasonal worker. Conflict because we're all humans. And you're now, so you're this business owner, right? Been for a while, and you talked about this conflict that you just had, and you had to remedy it. How have you, when you think about your younger self dealing with conflict, in a work environment versus how you are now, um, how has that changed and developed?
that example I gave, that's probably an example of how I failed at conflict management.
Mm.
But as far as on the positive side, a lot of what we do is very process oriented. And so if you imagine someone comes into an IT career, especially with what we call managed services, because we're dealing with networks of dozens of clients. So it's not like you come into a factory and you get to know that whole network and you don't really need processes because you get to know it and end up working there 20 years, everything.
Mhm.
Turnover is low in those kinds of positions. But in the type of work that we do, we're always taking on new clients. We have turnover at the entry level positions, And so we've just through the years from the very beginning gotten really focused on creating SOPs, standard operating procedures. And so I think it's a way that really limits conflict and problems because so we create a process for any and everything that we do around here. And we're constantly thinking of new processes. So when we're training somebody, we train them on the process and then we give them the freedom not to just do whatever they want to, but if they once they start working that process, because I might personally be 2 or 3 years removed from doing the actual work that I wrote the process for, they have the freedom to come back to me or one of the lead guys here and say, hey, I've been doing XYZ and I think we could do it a better way. Well, we look at it and we go, yeah, we actually could. Let's change the process. And then we're going to do the process from now on, just like that. So you've empowered them to, uh, be heard, and they have some empowerment knowing that they were able to modify and create a process. Now, here's where the conflict comes in is we train somebody up on a process and then they don't follow it. So
Mm-hmm.
for example, and I hope I haven't already told the story, but um, let's say on a computer setup for a new client, we have a checklist and it says to do X, Y, Z. And the reason and I communicate this, the reason we follow the checklist is because you can be on step 1 or 2 and then the phone rings and you go, need to go deal with it. And then you come back and you can't remember where you were.
Mm-hmm.
And so we tell them, check off everything that you do because it's a busy environment. You're going to be working on multiple different things. Well, I've had people or person that trained them on the process. They did the work, didn't never checked off the sheets, and I kept reminding them to check off the sheets and reminding them on why they should. Well, then a lot of times a technician will do the work on the bench, and then another technician takes the computer out to set it up for the client. And in this case, the second technician took it out and had to spend another 30 or 40 or 30 minutes to an hour because the first technician did not do all the steps that he said he did.
Mm-hmm.
And he had to kind of go back and he didn't really even know what had all not been done until he kept running into problems.
Mm-hmm.
So it created this problem. So I went back and so in private counseled the technician and said, hey, here's the process. Here's why you need to check this off. Here's the problem that it created. And, I thought he understood it, went back, this happened again. And so it took a second or third counseling to finally, for him to realize that. So the very last one that he did, he checked off. Well, having said that, is a couple days later he quit.
Mm-hmm.
And there's just something that some people, it just doesn't click.
Mm-hmm.
And it's probably a good thing for him and for us that, look, if you can't work in an environment where you have very open communication, crystal clear processes, the empowerment to change the process, and then that's too much, then that's when it's time to make a change. But overall, that's been a very positive way to deal with that conflict, is to have something to reconcile against a process.
I mean, that's music to my ears. I mean, process that I hear from business owners, from everybody over and over again, is having good process. And so that means thinking about what are things that come up and empowering people. So not only do this process, shut up and do this process, but you do
Yeah.
need to learn this process. And after you've done it for a while, is there something that it could be done differently? Is there a new something that you know? And having that discussion, which is for all the reasons that you said, that engagement, it also a way to stay fresh because there are new things. We want to benefit from the people around us. That being said, not every structure in an environment is for everyone. And the sooner people figure that out, the better it is for everyone, right?
Yeah.
Because if that person finally got what it is and did what it is you want, but they're unhappy and it's just not the way they want to work, well, then there's probably another place, another kind of environment where they
Yeah.
will thrive. And so, we're always just trying to shove, round, or, circles into square pegs, and it makes nobody, it's just so hard where that is now taking a space from the next person who's going to come along and they're going to be like, oh, freedom, because there's this system and I can do this checklist and then we're going to be on the same page.
Yeah, and it kind of goes back to that previous example. So that particular checklist that I'm talking about, years ago during COVID, I had a person that worked here, great guy, but he just checked stuff on the checklist. It was never accurate. I mean, it was either he'd check things that he didn't do or not check things he was supposed to do. And for that reason, I tolerated that because it was going to be a burden if I let him go on the other two guys. Well, the result of that is a good friend of mine and one of the guys that was working here ended up quitting.
Mhm.
And I have to believe he never like fully communicated to this, but I think that the fact that I tolerated
Yeah.
so much bad behavior, just in reflecting, I think that probably was a factor in him
Yeah.
leaving.
Good
And I,
people will leave if they think this place is not the environment I want. They're going to let this happen. That's not what I'm about. I'm going to go.
yeah,
Yeah. Well, Chris, this
100%.
time has completely gone away from us. And so I have my ending question for you is when you look into the future of work, you think about, your daughter being out in the workplace, what do you want to have happen so that not only will all workers be treated with dignity and respect, but that people will thrive and flourish?
Yeah, I think in our workplace, the thing that we really try to do, not perfect at it, but really want to really make an extra effort to get to know people. And I know being the boss, I can't be people's best friends. They don't want to hang out with me after work. I get that. But I want to spend time, and this is what we're trying to do, and a vision for how we could be better. But you know, at the beginning of the day, I want to find out, you know, how was your day or how was your night or how was your weekend? Hear the challenges that they're having in life, get to share the challenges, the things that are going on with me. And then we get to work and do good work and be of service to the community. And then another thing that we really try to do is we try to have lunch together as much as possible. It's not a mandated thing, but um, it's a really good time. We try not to talk about work, just get to spend time together. And actually, actually been an indicator for me is the people that don't want to spend time at lunch. Not every day, but if the people that they start here, we invite them to lunch, we go out to lunch. The ones that don't go, that just sit in their office or sit out in their car, it's a very good indicator that they're not engaged with the team. So for me, the vision for us is to just to have an environment where people like each other and respect each other enough that they will want to spend time together during the work day. And then a lot of them end up becoming good friends outside of work. And I intentionally don't try to insert myself in their life, but I don't know. I just want to work in a nice place without a lot of conflict. Uh, Conflict is not fun. Try to deal with it as best I can, as quick as I can. But I just want to work in a good environment, and so I try to create that, and could be a whole lot better at it. But that's my vision. It's not for me. I tell them I don't have financial goals. It's crazy. I run a nonprofit that helps people with business, but I intentionally do not have financial goals that we have to hit. I don't have salespeople. For me, it's just all about serving the clients. If we serve our clients and we're treating them well and we're treating each other well, then the financial piece will come along with it. And because truly, I just want to have a place that I can enjoy to work, that I can hire and help people get their career started. And it's not about the money, because at the end of the day, none of that matters. I just want to have a nice place to work and good experiences. And so that's my vision for my work life and for the company is to just have an environment like that.
Yeah, I like that so much because there's a lot of chatter, people talking about like what is work for? What should be happening at work? And this idea of just being so siloed, as if we are these little automatons that just do our work in isolation, but it's really
Yeah.
not what happens. We work on teams. That means we have to know other people and know their strengths and their weaknesses and have a kind of relation, an ease of relation so that I can talk about work stuff. And I know your shorthand of communication and that other person and what they are good at and that kind of synergy that happens. And so how does that happen when we don't spend time together? Like some of my best writing time is when I'm not writing, right? This is because all of that sets up for the next. So excellent. Well, Chris, thank you so much for your time. And
Thank you.
I really enjoyed this conversation.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. Thank you.
Take care. Chris, thank you so much for being on Conflict Managed. I love the work that you are doing in your nonprofit space, helping entrepreneurs in West Tennessee get established, continue, and thrive. And then, gosh, over 24 years in the IT business, what an accomplishment. Conflict Managed is produced by third-party workplace conflict restoration services and hosted by me, Mary Brown. You can find us online at 3pconflictrestoration.com. Come back. We have new episodes every Tuesday. And if you want to watch this conversation with Chris and I, Conflict Managed is on YouTube, and you can find us at 3P Conflict Restoration. If you want to check out my latest book, How to Be Unprofessional at Work, Tips to Ensure Failure, it's 80 tips of what not to do and considers what to do instead to have a healthy work environment. And I'm hoping that my newest book on winning the generation wars at work, making your age an asset, something along those lines, my title's still not set, will be coming out sometime in November, hopefully, of this year. So stay tuned for that. Our music is courtesy of Dove Pilot. And remember, conflict is normal and expected. Let's deal with it. Until next time, take care.